Most true crime stories end one of two ways. Either the killer is caught and punished, or they're never found at all. This is neither of those stories. These are three killers who were found, identified, cornered, and in every case, justice seemed only a formality away. And then, each time, the story broke apart. Three killers, three continents, three endings that were never really endings at all. Belle Gunness ran a lonely heart scam that would make modern con artists blush. She placed matrimonial ads in Norwegian language newspapers, luring wealthy bachelors to her Indiana farm with promises of marriage. The men arrived with their savings. They were never seen leaving. Her method rarely varied. She'd welcome each suitor with a home-cooked meal and a cup of drugged coffee. And once he slipped into a stupor, she'd crush his skull with a hatchet or a meat cleaver. Then came the part almost no killer, male or female, could stomach. She carried the body down to her basement and made sure it would never be recognized before burying the remains around the property. Neighbors would later admit they'd smelled something rotting on that farm for years and never thought to ask why. By the time investigators dug up her property in the spring of 1908, they'd found the remains of over a dozen victims. Some sources say as many as 40, buried across the farm like a garden of horrors. But here's the twist. Days before police could formally close in, Belle's farmhouse burned to the ground. In the ashes, they found 4 bodies, 3 children and 1 adult woman. The town wanted to believe that woman was Belle. Case closed, monster dead. Except the headless corpse was smaller than Belle was known to be. Dental records didn't match cleanly, and her long-time hired hand, arrested for the fire, insisted under oath that the body wasn't hers at all, that Belle had killed a stand-in, staged her own death, and walked away with a fortune stolen from her victims. For over a century, the town of LaPorte, Indiana, has stayed split down the middle. Did the Black Widow die in that fire? Or did she simply vanish into a new identity, richer than she'd ever been, and live out her days as somebody else entirely? Nobody has ever been able to prove it either way. In the town of Gachina, near Leningrad, a killer began stalking children and the elderly in the autumn of 1979. He was later dubbed the Gachina Psychopath, a title that barely covers what investigators found. Witnesses and case files described extreme violence and mutilation, disturbing enough that even hardened investigators struggled to process the scenes he left behind. His violence escalated fast. His first known victim was an 8-year-old girl found dead on a riverbank that September. And within weeks, he'd killed an elderly woman in her own home, robbing the place, then burning it down to cover his tracks. A young mother and schoolteacher was killed soon after. Investigators found no single pattern to who he targeted. Children, women, the elderly all fell within his reach, which was part of what made him so hard to predict and so terrifying to the towns around Gachina. Soviet police caught him quickly, within months, in a country not exactly known for transparent investigations. Vasily Smirnov was tried, convicted, and sentenced to the harshest penalty the Soviet system had: death by firing squad. Official Soviet records list his death as occurring in 1980. Not a date, not a location beyond Kresty Prison. Just a year. In a justice system that rarely explained itself to its own citizens, that vagueness left a door open. and rumors slipped through it. Some claimed Smirnov was never actually executed at all, that Soviet psychiatrists, fascinated by the sheer scope of his psychopathy, petitioned to keep him alive as a subject of study, hidden away in a state institution instead of a grave. No death certificate has ever surfaced publicly. No confirmed burial site is known. Officially, Vasily Smirnov is dead. Unofficially, the paperwork has never actually said so. This one almost sounds like fiction. Vlado Taneski was a respected local journalist in the small Macedonian town of Kichevo. The reporter everyone trusted to cover the string of brutal murders terrorizing elderly women in his community. Between 2005 and 2008, 3 women in their 50s and 60s, all retired cleaners living in the same modest part of town, vanished one after another, only to turn up dead, their bodies wrapped in plastic and dumped at the edges of Kichevo. A 4th woman, who'd gone missing years earlier, was quietly added to the same list of suspected victims. Each new disappearance sent the town into another wave of fear. And Taneski, notebook in hand, was always the first reporter on the story. The problem was, his articles were too good. Taneski's stories described details about the crime scenes that had never been released to the public. Details only the killer could know. Police tested his DNA. It matched. On June 22nd, 2008, Vlado Taneski, the man who had spent years writing about an unknown killer, was arrested for being that killer. He never got the chance to explain himself. The very next morning, prison guards found him dead in his cell, his head submerged in a small bucket of water in the bathroom. Officially ruled a suicide. A note was found under his pillow. But it wasn't a confession. It denied everything. "I did not commit these murders," it read. No cameras covered that bathroom. The prison governor said Taneski had shown 0 signs of suicidal behavior hours earlier. Eating normally, talking with his cellmates, calm as ever. To this day, questions remain about whether a man could really drown himself, alone, face down in a bucket that small, and whether suicide was the true ending, or simply the most convenient one.